All right, I am going to start up. Today is Monday, the 16th of November, and we're going to change things up just a little bit, and I'll explain that in just a second. But again, if you haven't done so, please go out to the P drive for the class, and there's a folder with today's date on it. Please copy that to your regular desktop or to the virtual desktop, and I'm going to do the same here. Just throw it out onto my desktop. All right. Couple things, because people have talked to me and said, because I've questioned the attendance patterns of some people, and they have told me, well, it's really hard for me to get up at 8 in the morning or come here for an 8 o'clock class. And believe it or not, honestly, I can understand that. All right, I mean, I know, especially when I was younger, I was a night person. I couldn't do anything during the day. Now I feel like dirt if I go to bed after 10 o'clock. All right, so, stuff changes over time. But I'm supposed to, I think, have a meeting before the end of the semester with my boss, and one of the things I'm going to ask her is what is the maximum number of points that I can put on my syllabus next semester for attendance/participation. And I'm hoping that she says to me 20%. Because that means if you're not coming to class, even if you're doing the work, the best you can get is an 80. And I look at attendance, and if that's the case, the best you're going to get is a C plus or a B minus. All right, and I'm not saying that because, I'm preaching to the choir in here, because most everybody in here are people who come regularly. All right, but it's on tape, so I'm saying it more for the benefit of those people who are not here. All right, and it's not going to change, and think about why. All right, now next semester, I think you guys said, what is it? You've got 4 classes. And the only way that we can set them up where you're coming 2 days a week, and we're actually encouraged to do that, because there are people who come into programs here who already have a degree, so they don't need the general ed requirements. So if we try to have all of your classes 2 days a week, that means that if you're working the other 3 days a week, if your classes are Monday and Wednesday, that means you can work Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or whatever. And that is why it's done like that. But with 4 classes, do the math. There'll be an 8 to 10, there'll be a 10 to 12, there'll be a 1 to 3, and there'll be a 3 to 5. All right? All right. So, just so you know what's in here, like I said, I'm going to change this up just a little bit because I was working on the class website over the weekend. Doesn't look very good right now, but I was working on it anyway, and I started thinking about the fact that we went over some jQuery, but not a whole boatload of it. So what you're going to get today and Wednesday is a whole boatload of it. All right, literally. So the stuff that's out there right now, you might look and go, well, there's only 4 files. Yeah, but if you look in here, for instance, we're going to go over part 1 first. Those are all examples. So there's about 13 examples right there. Overall, there's somewhere in the vicinity of 100 examples. Maybe it's closer to 50. I don't know. I don't really care. But as you probably guessed, too, as we go on, I've got a set of examples I'd like to go over today and about the same number that I'd like to go over on Wednesday. If we get through all of those today and Wednesday, then next Monday will be a lab period. All right? And when I go home and when I leave here on Tuesday, all right, sometime over the weekend, I'm going to be grading again. I did grade. I think I've got everything up to date as far as all your stuff that's graded. Now, unfortunately, with some of you, you'll send me an email and you'll go, here's my homework, and it doesn't work when I run it. So I put that down, and I understand that it can get frustrating. All right, but as far as I'm concerned, that when we come back the 30th or whatever, any homework that you're turning in, you're going to have turned in by then. All right, if you want any credit for it whatsoever. All right, so you'll notice that most of this stuff in here is commented out except for the last line. Well, that doesn't mean anything. These can all be uncommented, but what I want to show you is I've broken this thing today into talking about selectors. The actual file that we work on with this is real simple. It looks like this. And you go, well, what does that mean? Well, let's run it and look at it. That's the whole file. Don't worry about the red stuff. That's the thing that I've got that we're going to start talking about with jQuery. But the point is, there's not much in here. All right. All of you should be able to write the HTML to do this. What is it? I mean, it's an H1 heading. It's a couple paragraphs. It's a text box that doesn't even have a label with it. And it's an unordered list. That's everything. But what I want to show you quickly are some examples of how you can use manipulation by using what are referred to in jQuery as selectors. So when we look at this, and I bring this up, the key thing to realize here is, if you'll notice, that's the title, the thing that says this is the example of a title. Well, that title has an ID associated with it. These two paragraphs each have a class associated with them. All right? That text box has an ID associated with it. One of these ULs, or one of these list items, I should say, for the UL, has a name associated with it. And I'm not saying you get all that stuff, but to be honest with you, you should. You should everybody who's in here, I believe, is either in the 152, 157 class with me, or you're in the 152, 157 class with Jim Schmidt. And I know Jim has gone through this stuff. You should all understand the difference between using a class and using an ID and how they're used. That shouldn't be anything new, so to speak, for anyone. So what I want to do is to go through some of these examples in here, and I'm going to just reverse that. So this should make sense to you. What does this say? This says I should take the title, and I should apply some CSS to it. I should add an outline that's 1 pixel solid red. And I even put comments off to the right here so you could see what was going on. So again, when I run this one, now it's going to look different than it did before. And there you go. All right. And so why am I even doing this? Because I'd like to do this right now so that when we go over this in spring for the 152, 167 class, we're going to go through it like this. And the thing that's always kind of bad about going through something, right, we're a month away from the break. So right around a month away from the break, is that gives you plenty of time to forget it. All right, we're off for somewhere close to a month. I think that your last day is like the 16th. And I don't think you come back till like about the 21st of January or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So again, even if you didn't have the comments over here, you should be able to start looking at this stuff and figure out what's going on. This says what? This says every paragraph, I want to put a red border around it. All right. And again, when you run this, there's 2 paragraphs in here, and you can see they have a red border around them. All right. This does the exact same thing, but notice the difference between these two. In this case, this said every paragraph. This says everything with a class of P-A-R-A. All right. Well, if you notice, they're both paragraphs, and they both have a class of P-A-R-A. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So what you'll notice here is if I go back to this other one, they're exactly the same. So you get the same output. But if I came back and changed this, so this one was para, and this one was para 2, for example, and then I went back in and ran it, you'll notice that only one now has the border around it. Again, this is all stuff I'm telling you that should make sense to you. And if it doesn't, I'd strongly suggest that you go back and you take a look at, what was it, chapters 18 and 19 or whatever it was that went over jQuery in the book. Same kind of thing here. This says take anything, any list item that's in here, and give it an outline. All right, a red outline. Like I said, after a while, it's like, well, you're saying the same thing. Yes, I am. But the idea is what you're able to do when you do this is you're able to take a website and break it down using a combination of just regular elements, P elements, LI elements, UL elements, etc., along with classes and along with IDs to manipulate anything on the page that you want. What we're going to get to, not today, but in the stuff I've already got this stuff ready for Wednesday. I just haven't put it out there yet. But Wednesday we're going to write a program, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow you, it's going to have a little text box, and you can put in the name of any airport in the world. And once you put it in and you click a button, what's going to happen is it's going to tell you right now what the weather is at that airport, what the name of that airport is, etc. It's going to grab information from a website, and it's going to go and populate a bunch of stuff on your page based on that. All right? And everything that's done in there will be done using both that website and JavaScript or jQuery. But the idea is there's going to be no external code in there. There's no PHP. There's no ASP.NET. There's nothing that's working on the server side. What it's doing is it's using a client package to go out to the website and do something for you. All right? All right. So if you look in here, what does that mean? Well, that says a UL, but it's a UL that has a class of para. All right? And I might have even changed it around. I don't even know if this is going to highlight anything. And it's not. So how would we get it to highlight something? Well, we'd come back into here, and you'll notice that none of these have a class of para. But if I come through here and I grab this one and I say class equals para, just make that one change to add that, and then I come back here again and run this, all right, you can see what happened. But the idea here, and what you should get from this, is basically we're talking about descendants here. This is a child of this. And in order for you to be able to understand this stuff, you have to be able to understand the lingo, so to speak. And I kept it pretty simple on here. It may or may not look like it, but it really and truly is fairly simple. All right. Again, if you look in here, UL, LI first. All right. That makes sense? It's the first one. Now, unfortunately, the way that it's set up here with jQuery, and I don't know why they did this, with some of the stuff you work on, that's element 0, okay? But it is known as the first element, which is always confusing to people, but we've talked about this before, that whenever you're working with anything, technically this is treated as though it's an array, all right? So this is an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in it, but the elements are numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and again, that's just one of those things you got to get used to. All right. Now, if you look here, it says first child. That one said first. This says first child. All right. And if we look at the difference, I don't know about you, but I don't see any. All right? Because it is both the first element and it's the first child. And the thing you have to realize, again, this may sound real simple, but I want to make sure you get it, is when I say first child, all right, this list item is a child. It's a child of what? The UL. Thank you. And you have to start realizing that, because when you start to work your way down through the DOM, through the document object model, where you want to be able to add text, remove text, or change existing text, you have to know what goes with what, or it's really not going to make any sense. Here's an example of what I mentioned to you before. Notice it says UL odd. All right. Well, I don't know about you. When I look at this, it doesn't look like odd ones to me. It looks like even ones. But since you start numbering with 0, that's why I put those things in there where it says this is unordered list item 0, 1, etc. So this is an example. When you work with this, it almost is counterintuitive when you look at it. I mean, I look at it, and to me, that's an even, there's an odd, there's an odd, and there's an odd. But that's not how it works. In fact, you see this in the next example here, because if we go back to here, the next one's the same thing. Instead of saying odd, you say even. And it's even hard to see this. When you first look at it, you go, no, wait a minute, all of them have a box around it. No, they don't. All right. If you notice in here, this one has no box around it. When I highlight it, there is no box. Why? The reason it looks like there's one is there's a box above it and there's a box below it. And you can get as technical or as non-technical as you need to. What this says right here is anything with the word name in it, all right, you want to go and add a 1 pixel red outline or 1 pixel red border to it. Well, if we take a look in here, does anything have a name in it? There's a name, there's a name. All right, those are the only two I saw taking a quick look. So we should have around that paragraph, around the text box, and around unordered list item 0. And there they are. All right. And the reason that this stuff starts to get important when you do that is, again, you'll notice this, and we really go into more depth and breadth of coverage on working with forms. All right. What you want to do is, if somebody is in a form here, so this is a field in a form, and typically it wouldn't have red around it like that. But if they have tabbed into that field, or if they put their mouse in it and they don't put anything in it and they get out. All right. When I just clicked in there, that's a focus event. When I click out of there, that's a blur event. And you have to start understanding those different events and that different event structure for it to start making some sense to you. And we can go down even further. So this one says the name has to be test. All right. This one says the name has to be anything but test. So notice the difference between these two. All right. So that says this is an example of a paragraph. Well, if we look at that paragraph, its name was test. All right. If you look at the next example that's in here, looks a lot different. Not only that, do you notice there's a box around the whole thing? Because the body is an element too. All right. So the only thing that literally does not have a box around it, or the red outline, or whatever you want to call it, is this. Now this is a little bit nuts here to do what I'm about to show you, but there's nothing wrong with doing it. Thank you, Joe. That says everything on the page. You're used to that right now with star. All right. One thing that you're going to learn next semester when you get into the MySQL class is, fortunately or unfortunately, they don't use star for the magic character, but it is used in most circumstances like this one. All right, and then finally the last one that's on here, you again should be able to look at that and figure out what it is. Basically, it's anything with an LI. Take that and make that red. And you can see what's going on. All right, now I went through those quickly. What is it? It's not even 8:30 yet. But everything that's in there, all those examples should make sense to you. I'm not saying they do, but I'm saying they should make sense to you. And I tried thinking about this because I was working on, like I said, on this website, and I kept making links to do all this stuff, and I thought that's kind of ridiculous. because after a while I looked and I had like 19 links coming down from one menu item, and that's just too many. So I decided to go over it like this instead. All right. So let's look at some of this stuff. This is a little heavier, so to speak, because it's code. But the ideas are pretty similar to one another. All right. Remember that document ready function literally says once the web page has loaded. All right. Sometimes when you're putting stuff in there, you'll need to put it in the document ready function. Sometimes you won't. It depends on what you're doing. All right. But when this function is called, you can be sure the entire web page has been loaded into memory. That's the big thing. All right. Does that look familiar? It's the same file. All right. And I was waiting for that to come up and show me that, but it didn't. And I'm not sure why. All right, so let's just take a look at some of the other ones that are underneath here. All right. This says if you click on any paragraph, if you click on it, change the color to red. All right. If you let's assume that in your document you've got multiple paragraphs. All right. 5, 6, 10, doesn't matter. The word right here that you see in blue, that's a key word. That just means whatever the current element is. So what that's saying is whenever I click on the current paragraph, turn it red. Well, no, nothing's working. That's pretty good. So let's see if we can figure out why. What's that?
Paragraph. You clicked on a list item.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's the first time I ever made a mistake. All right. Still isn't working, though.
You didn't save it.
I didn't? Okay. Thank you. That's better. And notice, almost everything you work with in here, this is not an example, but almost everything that you work with in jQuery has a way that you can turn it on. It has a way that you can turn it off. And then it's also got something that's called toggle. So for instance, there is a slide up, a slide down, and a toggle, or a slide toggle rather. All right, you're going to see examples of all those. And the difference is if you tell, for example, with a slide up, you're telling it to disappear from the screen. When you say slide down, you're telling it to reappear on the screen. When you toggle, you're telling it whatever it was before, do the other one. All right. Not only can you set stuff up in a click event, you can set stuff up in a double click event. All right. And I've said this before, but in some ways I always think that when people do stuff like that, they're kind of being cruel. Because somebody clicks on it, nothing happens, they click on it, then they accidentally double click on it and don't realize they've done that. So they come back and they click again, and they click again, and they click again, and boy, well, now turn red again. But the point is, you can make something happen when somebody clicks something or when they double click it. All right? So they look pretty much the same as far as what's in here. So again, this says once the page has been loaded, that's the document ready. So when that happens, we want to associate this function with it that you see right here. This is called an anonymous function because it has no name. All right? And this says for any LI on the page, if I double click it, run another function, which says take the current LI and change its color to red. All right. Watch what happens here. So this is a mouse over. What was it for? It was for the LIs. This is one way that I can do a toggle. So when my mouse is entering that LI, I'm saying to turn it red. When it leaves, I'm telling it to turn it back to black. All right, you can see that I can go nuts here and do all this. But again, what's going on there is more important to me that makes some sense to you. So this says any LI where the mouse enters it, call a function to turn that particular LI's color to red. And when the mouse leaves that LI, set its color back to black. There's another way that you can do it too. Rather than having it say mouse enter and mouse leave, you can say hover. So this says when I hover my mouse over it, turn it red. When I stop hovering it, turn it black. So this should look like, when we run it, exactly the same as the other one. And you can see it behaves exactly the same way. So which one's better? All right, you could make a case and you could say that this one is better, the one that's not commented now, because it's only about half the lines of code that one is. But the idea is which one makes more sense to you. If it makes more sense to you to put both these in there, then you should put them both in there. All right. And again, the other reason that I'm telling you this is, yeah, there'll be a couple of assignments next semester. When we start, we're going to spend a few weeks going back over JavaScript. All right, then we're going to jump right into jQuery. I don't know if there probably won't be enough time to get into the Angular stuff, but we'll go through all the jQuery stuff. You will have a project to do next semester where you will have to build your own website. And then in that website, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, at a minimum, you have to incorporate this jQuery stuff into your website. All right, I already mentioned this one to you before, but this is focus and blur right here. What the heck was that? All right. So this is working with the input, so that's working with the text box. What it's saying is when it gets the focus, so when we click in it, put a red border around it. And when we leave it, have the border go back. It put no border around it. So in other words, it'll just use the default, which is black. I could have written black there, but there was really no reason to. So again, you'll notice when I click in here, there it is. It doesn't look that red on here, but it is red. When I click off, it goes away. All right? So focus and blur. And the reason that that's important is, again, I don't know where you are in the class with Jim, but ideally, at least, you've gotten to the point where you've talked a little bit about HTML5 form validation in that class. All right? And it's basically what's happening in here. Okay, I'm not putting any code in it, but I could put code in here that once I hit the blur event, if you left that blank, I could put some code in there that said, you know, that field is required. You have to put a value in there. That's basically the code that's behind when you're writing an HTML5 form and you put the word required in there. That's exactly what happens in the background. All right, just a couple more. All right, some special effects. And they're not all that great, grand, glorious, or anything else. But notice what this says. This says if you have any LI and you click it, hide it. And then we'll also have a button in there that when you click it, it'll show all of them. Does that make sense? So it is a way that you can hide and show things, which is interesting because most books that you read, all right, most books that you read will tell you that you should not have a lot of show and hides on a website. Because when things appear and disappear, that may make total sense to you, all right, but especially like older people, when stuff just starts to appear and disappear, all right, it can just kind of wreak havoc with them. So I click on any of these, you notice what happens. I click here, they're all back. There I put a little special effect in there. All right, we'll go over that in just a second. And this just turns it off. In fact, I put it in there. I think it's going to do it like 3 times. 1, 2, okay, make me a liar. But it is 3 times. Like shows it, doesn't show it, shows it, or vice versa. All right. Show them, hide them. Okay. So let's look at how that is done. I already showed you part of it here. But again, that's exactly what this is showing. Now, when you work with this, because the next example is almost identical to this one, but when you work with this, you've got your choice over how fast something shows. There's about 3 different things that you can put in there. 4 things. You can put the word fast, you can put the word slow, you can put the word normal in there. If you put fast, it happens in like it's about half a second or a quarter of a second. If you put normal, it'll take about a second. And if you put in slow, it'll take about 2 seconds. But you can also put a number in there, and that's what I've got highlighted. All right. Remember, these numbers represent milliseconds, and there are 1,000 milliseconds in a second. All right. So notice, I'll just keep it like this, and we'll run this. Oops, not from there, though. Okay, so you can see how fast it's going right now or how slow it's going, depending on your point of view. All right. Notice if I change that number that's in there from 1,000 to 100, now they're saying do it in 1/10 of a second. So it's happening a lot faster. So when you're working with things and you want visual effects, you can play with the numbers. That's all I'm trying to tell you. So you'll notice if I change that to 4,000, now I'm saying take 4 seconds in order to be able to do that. And again, what you'll typically hear from most sites is if you are going to do stuff when you're having things appear and disappear, have it take long enough that the person, and that look faster than that, but have it take long enough that the person realizes and can realize what's happening on screen. So that's just more of the same, this one. So let's see. Oh, okay. This looks like the other one. All right. But what you can add onto the end of this, notice all we said here was we just gave it a time, etc. Here we're giving it a time, but then we're saying when you're done, do this. That's called a callback function. So sometimes what happens is you want something to happen, you want to alert the user as far as what's going on. All right. And I'm going to change the time on this. I guess let's make it 2,000. I'm not having a lot of luck here. Alert done with It's supposed to be giving an alert box up there that says done. It's not, and I don't know why. All right. I would strongly suggest if you get time, not now, maybe if you get time during the break or whatever, you take a look at this just to see what's going on with it. That's all. The toggle I've already shown you. If it's off, it turns it on. If it's on, it turns it off. All right. If you don't want to show and hide as an example, all right, you can fade in and you can fade out. What's the difference? Well, it should be pretty obvious as soon as you take a look at it.
Don't you have to click on the list item?
I think you're right. Let's try it. There we go. But it's not really doing a very good job here of fading stuff in and fading stuff out. It's funny, it's one of those things that I sat there Saturday morning and wrote all these. Everything worked like a charm. So, not so much right
I
now.
wonder, is it because below, do you have that commented out or not?
The what?
Down, is that commented
Ah,
out? Is
yeah, that could be.
overriding everything?
You are probably right. Didn't notice that, but thank you. Yep, that was it. So did you see how it faded? All right, that's the idea, that it's fading, all right, as opposed to, and I guess that's all that was done in there was just the fade. But thank you. So again, ideally you can look at these and have some kind of a clue as to what's going on. There's fade out, there's fade in, and there's fade toggle. All right, so again, all this stuff is just done for effect. This is kind of an important one, so I want to show it to you. It looks very similar to what we just looked at, but there's two differences, and I just want to mention both of them to you. The first is, instead of saying fade, we're saying slide. All right, so let's look at that part first. You can see what's happening. Usually slide, people equate that with like pulling up a shade or pulling down a shade. All right, as far as what's going on in there. You can see how it's going. Okay, that's the one thing. But with some of these examples that I showed you before, and I could go back and show it, but I'm not going to. What happens is, what if I'm in here and I'm running this? All right, so what if I come in here and I run this, and I start doing this? In other words, I'm clicking it about 15 times. Well, notice it didn't run 15 times. If I did the other ones before I put that word stop in there, it would actually go through and do that 15 times. What it does is it buffers all the commands. So if I click the button, I keep clicking it and clicking it and clicking it, it does it once, then it goes to the buffer and says, oh, do it again, oh, do it again, oh, do it, and it'll do it that many times. What we're saying, with, you notice we got the UL stop here, and here, and here, which says basically run it, and once it's run, don't run it again, unless I literally click it again. Again, these are just more slide ups and slide downs, so you've seen that. All right, and then finally, just a couple animations. I know it looks like a lot, but we should be able to go through this in 5 minutes or so. This is why some people like using jQuery, although the effects that I put in here, they're not much, to be honest with you. All right, but I just want to show you. This, I'm not even going to run. This just basically says that I'm going to put a function in there that's called do animation, and when that function's hit, just say do animation called. That's all it would do. All right. Again, if we take a look at the example that's in here for this, it's virtually the same as the other ones that you'd already seen. There's a couple things that were changed in here, not very many. We put a button in here that said animate, and we're saying when that button's clicked, call that particular function. This is another thing that you do have to understand. What we're doing here is we're creating an HTML button. All right? There's the beginning, there's the end. The button's face will say on it, animate. And what this says literally is when you click that button, call the routine that's called do animation. All right? One thing is it'd be so easy when we go over this stuff next semester to confuse you. And what I mean is sometimes there's a half dozen ways of doing the same thing. So there are going to be times purposely, I'm not going to show you 6 ways to do the same thing. I'm going to show you 1 or 2. If you learn the other ones by yourselves, fine, not a problem. All right. What happened right there? Well, we told the system what we wanted to do was to change the font size so that it was only 10 pixels. And what we said was we wanted that to happen over the title, so we wanted to animate that, and we wanted it to take 1 second. We can put anything we want here in these properties. All right, if I wanted to change the color, I could come in here and say color, green. I don't know why I do that, but I could do that if I wanted to also. Come back and run the program again. Okay, now I screwed it up. Green should be okay. I need the quotes around it, I think. Let's try it that way. All right, I've got a feeling it's still not going to work, and I'll tell you if it doesn't, I'll tell you why in a second. I think that there's just a natural fight going on here between this and animation. There's no way to actually animate a color. All right. There's other things that you can do other than animate. All right. Such as, well, let's look at the next example that's right there. We're saying in the next example, which is very similar to the one you're looking at right now, but what we're saying here is we want you to animate, and not only do we want the font size to change, we want margin left to change. What does that mean? That means give me a margin of 100 pixels, which means we should be taking the title and pushing it to the right. All right, this is some true animation, if this works, that's taking place here. And you might say it doesn't really look like it. All right. What you'll see as we go on in just a second is I'm going to keep clicking the animate button, and this is going to start sliding over to here, and over to here, and over to here, and eventually it's going to slide right off the screen. All right. The reason it's not doing anymore is it's already done what we've told it to do. All right, so what did we tell it to do here? Change your font size to 10 pixels, change your width to 100 pixels, change your height to 100 pixels. But again, it's, for lack of better words, it's a one-time shot. Now notice the next example that's here. Because this is working with numbers. This is saying every time we click that button, all right, have it move 30 pixels away further from the top, or down 30 pixels, and right 150 pixels. You can barely see it because I changed the opacity too. I don't know if you can see it moving on the screen now. Let's get rid of that opacity just so you can see it. Instead of setting that to 1, let's set it to 8. Notice how every time we're clicking it now, that's true animation. All right? It eventually will go off the page, and I can keep clicking, and I can keep clicking and keep clicking. You go, it's not there. Yeah, if I come over here and I keep looking over, it's there. All right? So I can move it wherever I want to move it, on the page or off the page. All the other ones are pretty much the same thing. And that's what I wanted to show you. All right. So what we're going to end up doing, and these are the next ones, is what we'll do on Wednesday is we'll look at how you can manipulate the DOM, the document object model. All right. And I've got more examples. The last one, this one's not working correctly, and that's why I don't want to go into it right now. But this is what I mentioned to you before. So I can come in here, for example, I can write ORD, which is O'Hare. All right, and you can see what it gave me. What that did was that literally grabbed information from a website, and it grabbed certain bits and pieces of that information from the website, and it made it available to me. What it does by default when it makes it available to you is it makes it available to you in what's called XML format, Extensible Markup Language format, which is hard to read. So I parsed that into JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation, and said to just print it out as text. So it gave me that, and that, and that, and that. And I'm going to show you how I did all that stuff on Wednesday. The last example is supposed to do the same thing. But what it's supposed to do is if you have errors, it's supposed to give you an error message here. And that's not working right now. Not sure why. So I'm going to try to take a look at that between now and Wednesday. All right. Like I said, if you're behind, everyone who's in this room, on Friday of last week, I did grades. All right. You should be able to go in and look and see exactly what your grades are. And some of you who you've written me notes and you send me emails and said, I don't know why this doesn't work. I'll try to help you if I can. All right. With some of the rest of you too, you got to realize that in all seriousness, I've had people who've turned in their assignment 5 times. I'm not going to keep marking up and marking up and marking up every time until you get 100%. That's not how it works. If you turn it in once and it's kind of screwed up, I'll give you some hints. And if you turn it in again, then that's going to be what your grade is. And if it's late, you're going to lose points because of your grade or because of it being late. Questions on that? All right. Again, virtually everything that I just mentioned to you, you can go out to jquery.com and you can go out to the API documentation, and almost all that stuff that we went over is in here. We're not going over everything that's in here, but we're going over some of the major things that are in here. All right? And that's all that I had.